What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. We hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and that you have been paying attention or you're ready to catch up. Today, Tuesday, March 15, 2022, quite the day, the middle of the NFL's legal tampering period. The new league year officially begins tomorrow. That is Wednesday, March 16th, which means today is technically new league year eve. And sometimes around the New Year's, you get to be around family. Sometimes there is a sense of drama around that family, and that is definitely what was the case with the Dallas Cowboys on Tuesday. We had an emergency podcast up on the podcast side of Blogging the Boys, so you can listen to that. Please do subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Leave a rating, write a review. Those things are certainly very helpful for us. But we are streaming this particular conversation live on our YouTube channel, so you can join along with us. I see a lot of you are already here. You can always catch the rewatch, or we do put this up as a podcast for you as well. I say we because there are a number of people who join us every single Tuesday to talk all things Dallas Cowboys. We have joining us this evening, as we finally get Mark up there, we have Tom Ryle, who is on Twitter at TomRyleBTB. You can read him at bloggingtheboys.com, hear him on the Blogging the Boys podcast network, which is the case for all of our panelists today. We have Aiden Davis on Twitter at Aiden1214. We have Tony Catalina on Twitter at Tony_Catalina, the weirdo that has the underscore among our group. And Mark Lane coming in at the 11th hour, just like language in a contract that can cause it to be revoked, on Twitter at the real Mark Lane. Mark, how has your day been?
It's been hectic. It's been full of ups and downs, and getting the rug pulled out from under you.
Yeah, a very crazy day. Not exactly sure where to start. Tom, let's go to you. You're sometimes the most reasoned of us. However, today you did kind of wear your emotions on your sleeve. In fact, you wrote something for our site, for bloggingtheboys.com, that was titled, Randy Gregory debacle reveals the problems with the Cowboys front office. So, Tom, just to catch anybody up, and we have a lot of things to get to today on the roundtable. There's Randy Gregory, there's Von Miller seemingly, but this morning, as of Tuesday morning, which is a retail store, it seemed like the Cowboys and Randy Gregory were going to get back to the altar, renew their vows, so to speak, and lock him up to a long-term deal. In fact, it was reported that they had. And then out of nowhere comes the news that, whoa, Miss Lippy, hang on a second here. And Randy Gregory heads to Denver. The all-day long argument has been that the Cowboys tried to, at the very end, squeeze in some language in Randy's contract that his representation did not like. There has since been some clapping back that language is fairly common for the Cowboys, but not necessarily common for the NFL. So that is kind of where we're at, Tom, in this gazpacho of stink. So how are you feeling in maybe not the aftermath, maybe the middle of it all?
Yeah, I'm really hoping that things will maybe get a little bit more clarified. And what came up with some of the most recent stuff, I mean, literally we were going live. You mentioned that Ed Werder is reporting that this was a clause that was apparently not in his Randy Gregory's original contract, and that's kind of where the sticking point came, and it became personal. I think Gregory did not respond well to it, and according to Werder, used a 4-letter expletive that to express his attitude towards them, and it seems like things have just broken down. And for me, this is just a sign, once again, of where the Cowboys kind of insist on doing things their own unique, special way, which includes leaving a lot of wounded relationships and messing things up that they could have had. Without really knowing what the agent Randy thought they had coming and what the Cowboys had actually presented to them, and what seemed to involve a lot of verbal, personal interaction with Jerry Jones, it's hard to say exactly where this stands, but still, the word is this is not standard provisions in a lot of NFL contracts. That Dallas has a unique way of doing it, and that is something that really rubs me the wrong way.
So, Tony, I think a lot of people are quick to blame the Cowboys. A lot of people are quick to say, you know what, typical Cowboy, Stephen Jones, cat boy, clown. I mean, everybody sees the same comments on Twitter. But there is a world where there's one of two possibilities here. There's the possibility that the Cowboys did, foolishly, grossly try to shoehorn this in at the very end, or there's a possibility that Randy Gregory's representation is being unreasonable for whatever particular reason. Who do you blame more? Maybe it's 50-50, Tony. Do you blame Randy Gregory or the Cowboys?
At this current time, I'm inclined to believe that the Jones tried to do something a little different at the 11th hour. I mean, unless something else comes out that I haven't been made privy of, I feel like there was a deal that was ripped from the jaws of victory there. So to me personally, I think it's tough to kind of just say, Randy Gregory or his representation didn't do what's best for him, because it sounds like, at least everything I've saw, is that Randy Gregory was kind of leaving a little bit of money on the table to stay in a familiar situation. And when it turns out like, okay, they're going to slip these negotiations in there, whatever, I'm going to Denver and we're going to move on. So it's tough for me to try to blame anybody but the people cutting the check here in this situation.
Mark, Johnny Boy RN says, not sure what the added language is, but it projects an undermining business practice, the thing they're supposedly good at, amateur hour. Do you agree with that? Or, again, it's possible that maybe Randy Gregory's side of this is making a big deal about something that seemingly wasn't a deal with DeMarcus Lawrence 24 hours, seemingly hasn't been a deal with other players in the contracts that seemingly carry the same language.
Well, you got to remember that the thing with Randy Gregory, the prevailing narrative has been loyalty. The Cowboys have been loyal to him. He's been loyal to the Cowboys. And I think there may have been an expectation that because of his loyalty, that he was going to stay with them. He was going to eschew other offers, that this language that may be standard in the other contracts would be taken out, especially given that Gregory has stayed out of trouble since the NFL has revised a lot of the things that got Randy Gregory in trouble. And that may have been it. If I'm Randy Gregory, though, I have to wonder if I let my money get mad, if you will. And if I went and took the Denver contract because I'm upset with the Cowboys, and then what's that going to do to my realistic shot at having a productive second contract? So it's unfortunate because they did invest in each other, Gregory and the Cowboys, and now Dallas is going to have to try to find another leader in that defensive line group. But in doing so, this may be an opportunity for Micah Parsons to have even more of a leadership role than he would have had otherwise.
RJ, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that, Tom. Thank you for saving the day. Tom is our one true hero. Aiden, what I was saying is this is a difficult question to put on you, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. NFL Network's Jane Slater, who has been all over this story all day long, just tweeted right now while we're on, it's 5 p.m. Central Time, for anybody curious, before everyone vilifies Randy Gregory, which, by the way, has been happening a lot, as of late. Jane's tweet continues, how things are explained and presented are important here. I don't believe he had the proper context. If he was told Dak doesn't have the language, and again, it's been reported that Dak kind of the exception to this, but was never told that the rest of these contracts do have it, that might be important information. Is it possible, Aiden, that Randy's representation led him down the wrong path here? That is it's at the very least a possibility at play, I think, but what do you think?
No, I completely agree, because it would be a lot different if you were to see like this news story come out that Randy Gregory is considering not signing with the Cowboys now because of this contract provision, and then 2 days later he signs with the Broncos. I understand that he thought things through, decided that the contract stipulation, it wasn't good for him, and so he moved on. But he literally it was like what, an hour like after it came out that he wasn't signing with the Cowboys that it officially announced he was signing with the Broncos. And so it just kind of seemed like one of those things where, okay, why did it happen so quickly? If you like, I'm not presuming anything, but if Gregory would have actually thought things through and his agents would have actually talked through it with him saying, hey, there's 30 plus people on this roster that have this specific provision, this isn't an indictment of your character, then I wonder, would the negotiations still be going on? Would he still be a free agent now? Would he be a Cowboy? Would he be a Bronco? Who knows? It just seemed like everything happened too fast for me to not believe it's somewhat of a whim.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think any of us thinks, Tom, I know you wrote what you did. And again, it's been kind of a day full of cascading levels of information. I don't think any of us believe that 100% of the blame belongs on any one party. I do think we all think that there's a sector of blame that belongs on the Cowboys, and there's a sector of blame that, call it blame, call it whatever you want, responsibility that belongs on Randy Gregory's representation. Johnny Boy RN says this just corrupted the Cowboys' negotiating leverage for other free agent signings. A minimal bar has been set for other possible signings. Tom, what is the fallout from this? I mean, regardless of what percentage you place on Randy or the Cowboys or his agent, his representation, where do the Cowboys go from here? Where do would-be free agents, prospective free agents go from here?
Well, I have to just look at a general thing that this is probably going to create a level of distrust for like a free agent coming in the future, because they say, well, if they messed up that one, do I have to, go over everything with a fine tooth comb and look for something they're slipping in on me? And, I personally dealt with something because this seemed to be happening a lot fast. Since yesterday, it seemed like was when Jerry Jones got involved in trying to get Randy Gregory back into the fold. I went through a situation where I was made verbal assurances about something involving the road leading to my home. Was told, and other people were told that it was going to be taken care of. It wasn't a problem. 20 years later, we're living with a nightmare of a road that is tearing up, suspensions and everything, and we're having to kind of patch it together on our own. So I can understand how things were said. People were led to make assumptions, and then it fell through, which I think is part of what's going on. This seems to fit kind of into the shoot from the hip way the Cowboys sometimes go about getting to what they're doing. They have an objective in mind, but the way they get there can really go sour. So while I think that there could have been some lack of really digging into it on Gregory's side, this just fits into what I think is a lot of the built-in dysfunction of the fact that the Cowboys are run kind of like a little family operation and not the multi-billion-dollar corporation it is.
See, I think that actually works to their defense, though, because it seems like there's a world at least where they were a little bit more innocent in their negotiations than the like corporate world of agentry that maybe was at play and was a little bit more literal and a little bit more leaning on the hard and fast facts of what was happening here. But either way, as you kind of outlined, Tom, it does seem like there was this path of trust that dissolved up until they got to that point to where finally it was a matter of, I think it's in our best interest if we just go elsewhere. Mark, so whatever the case may be, while it is still only the legal tampering period and Randy Gregory has not signed anything, it's just a matter of agreeing to terms. It is incredibly unlikely, I think we all agree, that he would now spurn the Broncos and return to the Cowboys. So we know, Mark, that the Cowboys are financially prepared to offer a sizable contract to a pass rusher, which they were literally about to do to Randy Gregory. So that being said, Mark, how likely is it that the Cowboys pursue an edge rusher on the open market now?
Are you talking about Von Miller?
Well, we're just talking here, Mark. All right, we're just talking at first. All right, before we, let's wade into this. You're cannonballing into the deep end, my friend.
I think that they will get an edge rusher to just have their camp roster filled out and allow someone to beat them out, kind of like a glass jaw, if you will. I could see them getting an edge rusher now that the Randy Gregory deal's fallen through. But I think that they did want him back, and this was one of the bad things, one of the bad planks to a worst case scenario for the Cowboys in free agency would be to lose Gregory. But I think that they were prepared for something like this to happen. I don't think that they were entirely caught off guard, as emotional as it is. So I can see them going and getting an edge rusher in free agency.
It remains to be seen, obviously, who that would be. Mark, you mentioned it, so this is your fault. You're the one who brought up Von Miller's name. His name has been brought up all day long. Mark Lane just put it into the universe, not anybody else. But in all seriousness, we actually got like a barrage of Von Miller news all at once, which actually is what leads me to believe that there is a little bit more smoke to this than might initially have met the eye. In the matter of like 4 minutes, DeMarcus Ware, we'll get to that in a moment, had some more to say. Jane Slater said on NFL Network specifically that there is interest on Von Miller's part in joining the Cowboys. Obviously, he's a Texas native, went to the best school in the world. You know what I'm talking about, Tom. Aiden, you're not allowed to comment on this. And so that is notable that Von has interest. And then Benjamin Albright, who works on the Denver beat, also kind of pontificated that, you know, Miller could join the Cowboys again now that Randy Gregory is in Denver. I mentioned DeMarcus Ware. Tony, we'll come to you in a second, but here is exactly what he had to say on his Instagram. It wasn't his story, but it was a reel for anyone who cares about the particulars of IG.
Moves around the NFL. Russell Wilson going to Denver. Randy Gregory going to Denver. There's a missing spot in Dallas now. Just talked to Von Miller. Michael Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Von Miller. Sounds good to me.
So that was a really ugly way that showed up on our screen here. You know, didn't know that was going to happen that way, so that's on me. But you know what, Tom? Sorry that DeMarcus covered your face. Anyway, Tony Catalina, we've heard Ware like throw out breadcrumbs like that before. That's kind of his thing at this point. But again, not the only thing that has happened today when it comes to Von Miller. It does seem like that is very possible. And like talking about with Mark a moment ago, we know the Cowboys have some money to play with. Are you prepared to believe, or are you afraid to believe that Von could be coming to the Cowboys? Let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, you know, Aiden said it in our pre-production text messages. He was just saying, you know, Von Miller is going to be that guy that you get too excited for, get too built up for, and then they rip you out of your chest, or he stays in LA or goes, you know, somewhere else. But I mean, where there's smoke is fire. I mean, you said that perfectly. And I think the way it happened so quickly, where, you know, legitimate sources and people that, you know, do this for a living were corroborating that there's interest there. I mean, the parallels in the situation really lends itself to having real traction here. With Von Miller being from the area, you know, it would be an easy move for him, and I think it would fill a massive need. And we can't say that they don't have the money. Like you said, they were ready to give $70 million to Randy Gregory. So the money is there, the opportunity is there, and I think it's a real possibility, which scares me to no end. So.
Aiden, Alex Storm says Parsons on the edge and Miller on the same side would be terrifying to an offense. I mean, again, there's no doubt that Von Miller would make the Dallas Cowboys a better football team. You know, Tony's coming from a standpoint of like, look, we've allowed ourselves to dream about big names every single offseason. Now, again, to go back to a Jane Slater report, she tweeted out that, you know, there is interest from the Cowboys side, which has not necessarily been the case with the dreams we've had in players of past, the Earl Thomases of the world. How likely is this in your mind? I mean, like, are you prepared to believe this could actually legitimately happen? Or is this a case of Von Miller using the Cowboys, not that he's a low-level free agent by any means, but using them to up his cachet as the new league year officially comes tomorrow?
It's tough. I mean, I really want to believe that Von Miller would be like, ever since this news report came out, I've just been visualizing what Dan Quinn would be able to do with Von Miller and Micah Parsons. I mean, the versatility of those two players is insane. I'm right now, in my mind, I'm putting the chances at like 10% because Tony was saying there's like 3 teams. Apparently it's the Cowboys, the Browns, the Rams. I'm going to throw the Broncos in there just because they're not really being mentioned. Maybe they don't have cap space with Russell Wilson now, but there has been interest from Miller to return in Denver. And then I'm sure there's some other team calling him that has a massive amount of cap space. I'm putting it like 10% right now, but I mean, that was higher than it was this morning, which I would have said 2 to 1%.
Tom, 2 years ago when the Cowboys signed Gerald McCoy, I know Gerald did an interview with Marty Smith of ESPN, and what struck me about that was how he stressed that he was being brought into Dallas for a leadership role. And it kind of reminded me of the way the Green Bay Packers went after Charles Woodson, Mike McCarthy's Green Bay Packers, to be specific. And, you know, at the time, Charles Woodson hadn't won a Super Bowl, obviously a part of the Packers team that did. Joe McCoy obviously still, unfortunately, hasn't won one. It does kind of feel like Vaughn could be that big brother type of guy. You know, DeMarcus Lawrence is an older player, obviously, but a guy who's been there, who's done it in different teams, is now kind of an NFL mercenary, somebody who gets the lights and lavish lifestyle of being in the NFL. He's a Super Bowl MVP. Cowboys actually, by the way, have had prior to Von Miller, the most recent Super Bowl MVP who was a linebacker on their team before in Malcolm Smith. Broncos were featured in that game, no big deal. Mark, I know you're the trivia guy, so you probably have something cool to say about that game. But Tom, Vaughn could bring a really established presence to this team, that they really haven't had in a way that they used to go after the Keith Brookings and Zach Thomases of the world. This could really be that.
Yeah, he certainly brings in that been there, done that. So here's how you need to go about your business if you want to do the same thing. I love that aspect. I think he's still got enough talent. And given how this has all been playing out and some of the things that have been said, I'm wondering if there weren't some feelers, at least back before the whole Randy Gregory thing developed, that maybe Vaughn or his people reached out to the Cowboys and said, hey, if you don't work out the Randy Gregory thing, ... So I don't think this started just from nowhere. And that's one reason I think it heated up, is the fact that there might already be some channels of communication open. I hope so. I'm kind of like Aiden in the fact that before all this, I would have said it was less than a 10% chance of Von Miller coming. Now I'm thinking we may be looking at something like a 25% chance. It seems like it is not as far outside the realm of likelihood as it was just a few hours ago.
And interestingly enough, a big reason for that is the fact that Randy Gregory is not on the Cowboys, which is kind of the dysfunction that is encircling the team right now. And Mark, that has led a lot of people on Twitter, and otherwise, not to, minimize any other social media platform, but Twitter clearly the best. But a lot of people to say, well, you know what? Vaughn would be an upgrade over Randy. I don't care, whatever. And the process of how the Cowboys have arrived at several places has been a matter of good luck and fortune, as it is for a lot of aspects of life. In fact, the Broncos have been tied to that fortune. In 2016, as you know, Mark, drafting Paxton Lynch, saving the Cowboys from themselves. Just last year, drafting Patrick Surtain, who's a fine player, but set the dominoes in motion to fall for the Cowboys to draft Micah Parsons. So to make a long story short, Mark, with Von Miller, are the Cowboys better than with Randy Gregory? Like just those two specific pieces. What team is better with which player?
Well, on paper, it's Von Miller over Randy Gregory, but you have to look at the locker room and the cohesion, because you can have Von Miller, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Micah Parsons on the same roster, but in the same locker room. What are those dynamics like? Is Miller going to be accustomed to the Cowboy way, even though you said he went to the best school in the world, DeSoto High School? That's what you meant, right?
You know what? That's a great institution of that particular level of education. Totally agree with you, Mark. Totally agree.
So, but he's been in the Broncos organization and spent time with the Rams, and so they may do it a little differently than he's accustomed to, even though he is from the Lone Star State. So just how does that mesh together? Troy Aikman, with regards to the Rams, it's kind of funny because he was wrong, but he said these all-star teams don't always work out. And we've seen the Cowboys have some all-star teams before, notably 2008. And when the cohesion's not there, then it doesn't lend to great results. And that was the best thing, and why the 2021 Cowboys generated so much disappointment is because they did have the cohesion in all three phases and couldn't even win a wild card playoff game. But I think that Von Miller, I don't know if I'm imbibing in the hopium that the rest of you all are, but when I look at Jane Slater's tweets, the quoted portions of them, they really resonate with me because I have seen those phrases before. And
expand upon them.
I really
Mark.
think that the Cowboys really are interested, just based on looking at the phrase due diligence, because there's one particular person that tends to say that a lot publicly.
Mark, before we get to Tony, because you you probably know the verbiage of the Cowboys through how they speak better than anybody. So, and you're right, there are certain, maybe not catchphrases, but certain words, certain keywords, buzzwords, whatever you want to call them, that you can isolate to truth and fiction. And so what percent, and this is admittedly asking you to guess, but what percent of their interest, if you have to pick up the 100% interest that you think they have, however minimal or large that interest may be, but what percent of it do you think is derived from missing out on Randy Gregory and the narrative that this has created? Like, how much do you think it's a matter of, we have to get this because we look like fools right now, whether they are wrong or not? And the Randy Gregory thing, the Cowboys thinking, we need a big thing, we have to get something big. What percent of motivation do you think that is, even if it's 1%?
I think it actually relates to DeMarcus Lawrence, and if they would have missed out on that or messed up with that particular contract and getting him back, I think that's when the Von Miller stuff started. So this isn't really a reaction to the Randy Gregory stuff. It is for the fans, just, in terms of the news and when it happened and the emotions. But I think that this was actually a plan that was derived as part of a fail-safe for if they couldn't get DeMarcus Lawrence back, because of how much he means in the locker room and as a veteran. And that's really what you get in Von Miller, is that champion veteran off the edge.
I think that's well said. Okay, Tony, you are the one who's most willing to fall in love, as we often say here at Blogging the Boys. And you actually talked about, with Aiden and with Dave Sturcio on First and 10 this week, all you homers, by the way, you are all the way back. You guys have been sitting here and throwing stones at the Cowboys only to come. I'm sure you've already ordered jerseys. You probably have a Michael Gallup jersey on the way because you guys just couldn't help yourselves. That being said, Tony, hypothetically, it's announced in the next few days that the Cowboys have signed Von Miller. We get an Instagram post of Von, working out with Micah Parsons or something like that. Your aspirations for this season go from X to Y.
It's you say I'm positive now, but I think that's a real, growth development in myself, how negative I've been since the wild card. So I'm really happy I've been able to turn the corner there. I was feeling really good about the things because at least what they were telling us were actually happening. So it wasn't smoke. Like, we didn't love the Amari Cooper move, but what they said and what they did are kind of matching up. And this one, it kind of threw a wrench in it. If they were to sign Von Miller, it would definitely intrigue me. I'm not ready to put like a number on it because I don't know what else. There's still moves that have to be made. I'm still in the camp that they need to sign Jaron Kearse. It's getting tucked away, but I love the Malik Hooker signing. So like him coming back, but Von Miller in the short term, I think we touched on, I think would elevate this team's edge rush. Probably even to the point where I'm not saying forget Randy Gregory in that instance, because I thought Randy Gregory was awesome. I was, a key member of his fan club this year, but Von Miller being on this team, what he did last year in the playoffs and how he helped that team in the Super Bowl run, it would make me feel really good about this team and what they're trying to do.
Aiden, Von signing with the Cowboys would be their biggest free agent arrival since who, in your mind?
You're asking the 22-year-old here.
Well, I know, but like recent history. I mean, I'll ask everybody this question, but we'll come back to you. Tom, you get the question first. Von arriving in Dallas would be the biggest free agent acquisition. Would make you feel the most giddy since who?
How about since before I was born? I'll say that.
I think that's still a little too dramatic, but it's up to you. Whatever mood you're in, Aiden. Yeah.
A lot of us felt that this was what was going to happen with dang it, I just went blank on his name. The cornerback they signed that was the one that burned them on the free agent.
Brandon Carr is who you're thinking of.
Yeah, I was going Brandon Cox in my head for some reason and knew that was wrong. But he didn't work out. I think it might be that kind of anticipation among some of us. Beyond that, I don't know. Maybe all the way back to Dion. That seems.
I'm certain Mark's going to have the right answers. Let's stop wasting time with the wrong one, Tom. Mark, give us the correct answer.
Good at it.
He is correct. For the podcast audience can't see you, Mark. Just to be
Terrell
quick.
Owens.
Terrell Owens is the answer. That was like juice. That was, I mean, a certified star playmaker. It's not just a big name, but somebody who was still legitimately at the top of their game, which, Vaughn, say what you will about his age, but obviously, I mean, his postseason performance speaks for itself. Does anybody else come close since, I guess, T.O.'s 2006? Anybody between 2006 and now, Mark, that is in that neighborhood?
No, really, because Dallas kind of that's when they were transitioning over to the Stephen Jones, only so much pie philosophy. And really, it would have to be Brandon Carr in terms of someone that they signed that was, as Jerry called, we paid retail. But, they haven't really made all these big splashes in free agency, even though that is the reputation for the team because of how outspoken Jerry Jones is and so forth. They really they don't make a lot of splashes in free agency. What they consider a splash is if they re-sign one of their guys. Oh, that, what are you talking about? We weren't active in free agency. We re-signed our guys. So,
the DJ Dog, I think purposefully butchered the spelling in our comment section, but Nnamdi Asomugha in 2011 would have been the answer if Dallas had landed him instead of Philadelphia. But thankfully, that did not work out that way. So Tony, Von Miller, we're willing to table this. If he's a Cowboy, great. We're all, that's the jersey you're buying. I say let him wear number 94. I tweeted this out. Let's go full circle with DeMarcus Ware and have him mentor Micah Parsons. It'd be super sick. And the Randy Gregory of it all, I love the kind of pettiness, whatever. Okay, so Cowboys so far have returned a lot of players. You mentioned Malik Hooker. What's your favorite? Who's your favorite? Is it Malik Hooker? I mean, aside from Michael Gallup, because, that one kind of speaks for itself. I don't think they should be given any credit for this, by the way, because a lot of people are like, oh, man, well, the Cowboys, they had to bring back Michael Gallup, with Amari Cooper gone. They traded Amari Cooper. They created that hole themselves. I don't think they deserve any attaboys for that. Your favorite move that they have actually made so far, Tony?
I think you hit it. I think I like Malik Hooker. I thought he was developing into a nice role here later on in the season. I think the talent has always been there. I think I've said that all year. Malik Hooker's issue has never been his skill or his ability that he was able to stay on the field. And I think he's going to grow within Dan Quinn's system. I was super excited about it. I don't know what it is because as a Cowboys fan, we already know that safety play isn't valued around here. But I just love the idea of having Jaron Kearse and Malik Hooker there. So for me, if we can sign those guys up, I'd be super pumped up about the back end. And, with the development of Kelvin Joseph and Trayvon Diggs, I like the way it looks back there.
Aiden, can you believe that Tony just disrespected Noah Brown like that? Didn't even think about him for his answer.
I mean, I didn't even think about Noah Brown when I was thinking through that question.
Who's your answer then?
Am I allowed to say DeMarcus Lawrence since they signed him to a new contract?
No.
Am I allowed to say the cheapness of the Michael Gallup contract?
No.
So then what's my Noah Brown, I guess.
Malik
Let's
Hooker.
go wide receiver 3. Yeah, the right answer. If you're allowing me to double up, the correct answer is absolutely Malik Hooker. The only thing that scares me about Malik Hooker is I'm scared that they now see Hooker and Dono as the two safeties, and they're
willing to let Kearse walk.
And they're willing, this was kind of a sign that they're willing to let Kearse walk. If that's the case, I'm a little bit scared. But if they're just adding Malik Hooker for what he, as a good depth piece, a good depth safety, I'm really happy with how they handled that.
I do think, the reports after the Hooker signing were his role on defense is expected to grow next season. That could be the laying of the groundwork for the, we're going to move on from Kearse. He's a little bit out of our price range. He played too well. Let somebody else overpay him, whatever the case may be. Tom, what is the worst thing that the Cowboys have done this season? You cannot say the Randy Gregory thing. Because, again, that is also still kind of TBD. We're learning more about that as the situation unfolds.
The worst thing has to be when Stephen Jones started his whole we got to fight the salary cap, and so he put the shadow over Amari Cooper and DeMarcus Lawrence. It worked out with Lawrence, fortunately, but I think the Cooper thing, I think they may well have been moving on from Cooper anyway, but just doing it out like that kind of got this whole thing that I think the lack of trust, the in the negotiating process and how you're being handled. I think that bled into what happened with Gregory to a certain extent. So it's all a continuum, and it all kind of interconnects.
On the subject of Gregory, just as a segue of sorts, he's represented by the same person who represents Lyle Collins. And Mark, we haven't really discussed Lyle Collins right now, or really recently, because again, all these things have kind of been happening. It's just that time of year. The latest on Lyle Collins, which was reported by the Dallas Morning News on Monday, was that it's unlikely that the Cowboys are going to find a trade partner for him, and that a release is probable, despite the fact that on Sunday, ESPN's Ed Werder reported that there were at least 6 teams involved in discussions, or at least interest in Lyle Collins. We did hear about 5 teams being interested in Amari Cooper before the Cowboys ultimately dealt him to the Cleveland Browns. JT, thank you for the super chat, says there are reports that the Patriots want to trade for Lyle. What do you think they would give up for him? They just got a 5th for Shaq Mason. So today, in the onslaught of NFL news, a lot of things happening across the league. The New England Patriots trading Shaq Mason to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, reuniting him with Tom Brady in exchange for a 5th-round pick. That one did not need a 6th-round pick swap. But that being the case, Mark, the Patriots could be a destination for Lyle Collins. Do you think that happens? Is it too obvious at this point that they trade for Lyle Collins? I mean, do you think it's more likely that he gets released? Again, is the fact that he's represented by the same person who represents Randy Gregory a factor in all of this with everything that's happened today? Where's your head at?
Dallas is trying to avoid paying Collins his guaranteed salary, which is due on March 20th, correct?
I don't think it's due until the summer. I think they have, if they want, they can squat on that for a while. So they don't have to make a move, but go. I'll double check that for you, Mark, but go ahead.
Okay. Because if that's the case, then teams know that Dallas has to release Collins so that he's not due that money. So then, well, what's the rush to trade or give up a pick for him? Dallas is just really kind of selling at that point, and they have to listen to what other teams have to offer.
You were right, by the way, Mark. It's the 5th day of the league year, so that's Sunday.
Okay, yeah. So that's what teams interested in Collins are probably going to do, is just wait out the clock with Dallas, and they'll release him, and then they can sign him to their own contract. They don't have to take on the Cowboys contract and give up a pick to do so. So that could be what happens with Collins, more than likely that they find a trade partner. So when you hear the teams talking and asking and so forth, they're just really seeing what the price is. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will flip the switch and take Collins.
Tony, do you think he's traded? Do you think the Cowboys pull it off?
I think what Mark is saying makes a lot of sense. I think there's no real rush or need to. I mean, I guess the one point of it is you would be able to kind of shrink the pool and like make it happen. So if you can trade like a later round pick and kind of make sure that he's yours, then that's fine. But other than that, there's no real rush to trade for a guy that's literally just waiting to be cut.
Aiden?
No, I don't think and I think part of it is on the Cowboys side. I don't think they're comfortable with where they're at salary cap wise right now. And so they're not just going to bite on some horrible offer that they clearly know they're not getting enough value. Even if they take on the contract, I think they're kind of playing the waiting game right now to see what's our salary cap going to develop into. If we're not able to sign Miller, if we're not able to sign Wagner, then there's no point in trading Collins because there's nobody else that is deserving of that massive contract.
Tom, however, they move on from Lyle because that seems inevitable at this point. They're not a better football team, obviously, as far as their roster is concerned, but this move does feel a little bit different than Amari Cooper, in that Lyle has I think, fairly lost their trust. I don't know how anyone can say it's unfair for the Cowboys to feel like their trust hasn't been tested by Lyle Collins.
Yeah, I think he and Cooper are very similar in that aspect. There was something that broke down. And I think it's more obvious with Collins, with the suspension and everything. I think they just got a little fed up. And, he has missed a lot of time. And it makes sense that maybe they should move on. I think they've got a lot of faith in Terrence Steele going to a starter, too. So they don't feel like this is as bad as a situation as has now developed with Gregory. I think that the hole on the defensive line is bigger than on the offensive line right now. Although I'm scared about left guard at the moment. So,
I think all of you are right. I think it's just an unfortunate situation with Lyle. I think it's just a matter of time. And I think it's probably best that he and the Cowboys move on, kind of like the Randy Gregory situation became. Again, sometimes things just happen. It is what it is. Mark, the Cowboys, on the subject of draft capital they received in trades, they did receive a 5th-round draft pick in exchange for Amari Cooper today. In fact, right before we came on, we wrote about this. There's an article up on bloggingtheboys.com. The Cowboys receiving 2 5th-round compensatory picks in this year's draft by way of their free agent decisions a year ago. We'll see if they're in line to receive any this coming year. Obviously, Connor Williams, who's now a member of the Miami Dolphins, could factor into that. Whatever the Cowboys do could obviously factor into that as well. But 2 5th-round picks. You pleased?
Sure. Really, what you can do with these picks is you can use them as packages to move up and go get someone you like, or to move back. And really, that's what I think the Cowboys try to do with free agency, and why they consider we like our guys the same as signing someone on the market, is because they want to give Will McClay the draft capital to go work his magic. And that's how you can do it, is by generating these compensatory picks. So again, this is what I say on Hidden Yardage,
which you can hear every Monday on the Blogging the Boys podcast network. Monday afternoon it drops. Mark Lane and Sean Martin. Give the plug, Mark. You're such a great plug artist for everybody else. Plug yourself.
Yes, I have that problem. So basically, what was I saying?
If you talk about the 5th-round compensatory picks,
all right,
McClay,
yeah. So free agency is when you see your cousins open up all the toys at your grandparents' house on Christmas, and you get socks and books and educational gifts. But the draft for Cowboys fans, that's your Christmas, when Will McClay uses all of his scouting, and then they make good picks, and they find someone in the 5th round, day 3, priority free agents that you like. So this is, I think it's good because it gives them capital to move up and down. But, they're also 5th-round picks. I would have thought maybe they could have got a, 4th this year, but not every year.
One of the 5th-round picks, a result of Andy Dalton. So, big thank you to him. Andy, the gift that keeps on giving. Really, everybody. Tony, been saving the hard question for you. I've actually been meaning to write about this all day long, and I haven't had a chance because, but the obvious. But this morning, the Los Angeles Rams released punter Johnny Hekker. This was something that they were rumored to be in consideration of doing back in training camp. We wrote about it then, pat ourselves on the back, about obviously he has a relationship and a history with John Fossil, Cowboys special teams coordinator. And what's notable about that is how much John Fossil likes his guys. The Cowboys had to settle for Brian Anger, who you have expressed a great love and admiration for, turned in a Pro Bowl season, and it was already reported this offseason that the Cowboys are likely not going to bring him back. It's likely going to get a little bit more money on the open market than they would be willing to pay. Now, Johnny Hekker, a very widely known punter, probably going to be commanding a fair chunk of change himself, but what he has that Brian Anger does not is a history with John Fossil. So that being said, Tony, we're going to ask everybody this. Nobody be hypocrites here. Should the Cowboys pursue punter Johnny Hekker?
I think they should, and I think they will.
Hypocrite.
If Brian Anger is priced out like we said they are, the fit is just almost too good. I think we were talking about this. We were waiting to see if this was going to happen last year. I'm glad it didn't, because Brian Anger, like I said, pulled out a Pro Bowl season. But yeah, it's almost like it's one of those things where it's just too obvious and too good that it almost feels like it's bound to happen. But yeah, Fossil loves his guys, and Johnny Hekker is definitely one of those guys, so it's a no-brainer for me.
Aiden, would it be hypocritical of all of us to champion the Cowboys signing Johnny Hekker when we have said everything that we have about the nepotism surrounding John Fossil getting his guys, by way of Greg Zuerlein 2 years ago, who the Cowboys did cut before last weekend began, and Jake McQuaid, who they did get back on a 1-year vet minimum deal on Monday? So your thoughts?
Well, the first question was, would it be hypocritical? Yes, but it's always hypocritical until it goes in your direction. So who really cares about that?
Wow. Only 22 and yet wise beyond your years.
But Jose Christian in the chat has the right answer. fifth round picks are so unbelievably meaningless. And when I say meaningless, I mean meaningless. Take Matt Ariaza from San Diego State. I love the punter. He can kick and he can punt. Maybe throw him in there for within the kicking competition as well. Guess what? If your fifth round pick means nothing, use it on a punter who is, I mean, punters are about as safe as they get. You know what they're going to do in the NFL. Take Matt Ariaza. I don't even really know how to pronounce his name. Amazing punter.
Matt A. We'll just keep it there.
Matt
Just put an A on his on his clothing. That's what the premise of a lot of movies and sitcoms and points of literature. But Tom, your thoughts on Johnny Hekker? He can run the trick plays that John Fossil loves so much.
Yeah, I loved Aiden's answer. I think the idea of they're getting all these late round picks, that might be a way to go, which means that I think they probably will go after Hekker and claim victory while Stephen Jones is popping the champagne cork over getting those extra fifth round picks, because that's really his goal.
Okay, Mark, do you agree with everyone here? I mean, are you all just hypocrites now? I mean, I guess nobody has any morals they want to stand on.
Well, let me throw this in. The last time the Cowboys used a fifth round pick on a kicker was David
Beeler. Yeah.
In 2009. Okay. Yeah. So
that's really underselling, David the Machine Beeler is really what we were looking for, Mark. I mean, again, the bench press reps at the combine, can't forget.
Yeah, that's right. But I think that if you add Johnny Hekker, it's not just being able to run the trick plays. You also have the familiarity with the field goal operation with McQuaid and Hekker, because those were the guys. But with Zuerlein gone, now they'll have to get a different kicker. So, I think that it may be hypocritical, but so what? I mean, this is over special teams, okay?
It's a phase of the game, Mark. How dare you?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't like this is being hypocritical over the seafoam pants or something.
That's, I guess, important and well said. Anyway, okay, so let's go around the bend as we kind of start to wind down here for this roundtable. It's been a very, very busy day. This a bit of a stolen idea, sort of, from Scott Van Pelt. It's one big thing. Tony, one last thing. What's your one last thing? How are you feeling right now? What's your one last thing, one thing you want? Nobody can repeat anybody's answers, which means, actually, Tony, you're going to go last. Aiden, we're going to go to you first. One last thing, it can be anything you want. It can be a message to the Cowboys. It can be a player you want them to sign. It can be something you don't want them to do. One last thing that you get to say right now before the new league year officially begins. Consider it your ode to this past year, and you leave it all in the past. The slate gets wiped clean tomorrow.
So this is supposed to be one last, this is supposed to be in reference to last year.
It's a bit of a vague exercise, Aiden.
Okay.
So.
I'd say everybody's focusing on Von Miller, Bobby Wagner. The one thing I'll say, if we can use some of that money to spin big on offensive line, maybe somebody he wouldn't be huge, but somebody like Trey Turner, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think he's been signed yet. Maybe he got signed today and it just went over my head. Somebody like Trey Turner, I think, would be big. So while it'd be fun to imagine Wagner and Miller coming into the defense, think of they are in a very good cap situation. What if we boost up the offensive line a little?
And you know what? I mean, Mark talked about how free agency is like the Christmas gifts from your grandparents and their, socks. But those are things you need. I know Mark poo-pooed them, but they are things you ultimately need, and that's what the Cowboys do. They approach this time of year as raising the floor, so that come draft night, if they are wiped out, if Kenyon Green's gone or if Zion's gone, whatever, I mean, they have an ability to go in a number of different directions. And so in that sense, I agree with you. Mark, you're up next. Tom, not you. What is your one last thing?
I think that if I really think it would. I like the Malik Hooker signing, but I think it would behoove them if they could get Jaron Kearse back, because he was a guy that really came into his own and just tapped into his own potential in in Dan Quinn's offense. So as exciting as it'd be to get Von Miller and Bobby Wagner, I think just having guys like that who you can show that, hey, they did it our way, they listened, and this is what they became. Because then you can use them as an example to some of the younger players or the newer players of what happens when you buy into Dan Quinn's system.
Okay, so Tom, Aiden has talked about addressing the offensive line. Mark has talked about bringing back Jaron Kearse specifically because of the message it would send. Again, a guy who did it your way and it paid off for him. What is your one last thing?
Well, mine's kind of a bigger scope and also very much a pipe dream. But I wish they could find the equivalent of a Will McClay to handle contracts and negotiations and cap management and let Stephen Jones just be more of the figurehead that his father has become. And like I said, I'd love to see that, and I have like 0% hope that it's actually going to happen.
For what it's worth, Alex Storms, one last thing, kind of along those lines. So stop telegraphing your moves or flat out telling everyone what you're doing. Again, everything that we have heard or seen rather has kind of been talked about, and some of the things that haven't even happened yet, like the Lyle Collins situation. Tony, all right, one last thing.
One last thing is for me, it's been a whirlwind off season. You know, it's been a whirlwind day.
It's been 2 months.
And yeah, and I'm exhausted, man. I'll tell you. So ultimately, I'm looking for some stability here. Maybe it won't come today. Maybe it starts tomorrow. I know we talking ad nauseum about the Randy Gregory situation, and we can try to play it down and say, you know, things like this happen. But the fact of the matter is, this was a unique situation, something you don't see every day. To see a guy that the team has invested personal feelings in, you know, and had personal interest in his development, turn around and go somewhere else based on a breakdown of communication. It's kind of been what this offseason has felt like to me. I just want to see some calm. I want to see some quality moves being made. I just want to see some stability across the board. I'm not looking for the Bobby Wagners and the Von Millers, although I would love it. But at the end of the day, I just want to see some positive moves being made where it gets back to football. This team has enough topics, has enough traction in the media. We don't need any more of this stuff. Let's just get back to business.
Hey, RJ, what's your one last thing?
I believe he's waiting for the dog to stop barking.
The dog. Yeah, it's been a bad day for me on mute. It's been a long day. The dog is barking. There was a dog outside, so the house under extreme attack. Tony, you did get a comment from Johnny Boy RN, as my dog is super upset. Says that you did forget to say at the end of the day, but you did mention it. So just so you know,
I've learned. I want to thank Sturcio. He pointed out to me I got to study some more of my own game tape. So apparently, at the end of the day, I need to watch my own film.
So I know that I've been charged with answering this question, but I do want to bring something up so that we address it. A tweet coming out just now from ESPN's Todd Archer. I'm just going to read it verbatim. The forfeiture clause that caused the rift that led to Randy Gregory agreeing to a deal with Denver is in the deal he signed as a rookie in 2015. As others have said, it's standard for the Cowboys except for Dak Prescott's contract. I think we're all willing to, concede that Dak is an exception, whatever. Other teams also have that language as well. Tom, you wrote about this, so I'll come to you first. We're going to go around the bend. This was in Randy Gregory's rookie contract. Does that change the narrative at all? Does that change how you feel at all? Or is it a meaningless data point in all this?
It just, to me, raises the question of what really went wrong then. Was this... There's something here, and there has to be some kind of a breakdown in the relationship. And maybe we just don't really understand what it is. And the more we hear, the more puzzling this gets. And it's like there's all kinds of different things going around. And I don't know if we'll have this sorted out by this time next week.
Mark, I think the information we have the least amount on, or the thing we have the least amount of information on, is what Randy Gregory's representation was thinking here. We're starting to see the Cowboys are kind of showing their books here a little bit, right? And hey, this was in Randy Gregory's contract, whatever. So I think that the most questions that are left have to do with that side of this. Do you agree?
Yes, and that'll come out more. We'll hear more from Randy Gregory's people as to what it may have been. I think that from Randy Gregory's point of view, he feels like he showed the loyalty. He did his part. He was going to come back, just drop this thing, this part of the language, because, I've proven my loyalty. I've proven that the suspension stuff's not a problem. And it just didn't get taken care of until the 11th hour, and now he's presumptively headed to Denver.
Tony, does it make you feel any different to know this was in Randy Gregory's rookie contract?
No, because
so it doesn't make you feel any better about the Cowboys.
It doesn't really make me feel any better about the situation in totality, because I mean, if we're being real with ourselves, Randy Gregory, listen, I have been number one on his fan club about his progression, his maturation. But at the end of the day, we're talking about millions of dollars. If the Jones want to protect themselves on the back end, you got to take the personal feelings out of that. If I'm Randy Gregory, like, I understand they're making a massive investment into you. It's not personal. They've stuck by your side this whole time. If it's one little provision in a contract that covers their own backside if you do something wrong, and they're not saying you will, they just want to be covered in a $70 million contract. At the end of the day, anyway, at the end of the day, they're saying, Randy Gregory, if you're gonna leave us over this, then I'm sorry. Like, that's a tough deal, and it doesn't make me feel any better about it one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat as Tony here. We don't know what's happening in the back office, so I'm not really making any assumptions as to this person's the villain in this instance. The Joneses are the villain. The Gregory. I'm not presuming that, but just based off what we know, I bet that provision was in there in the contract, the 1-year deal contract he just signed, when the Cowboys were kind of taking a risk signing him to a 1-year deal. But now he's this high price free agent that everybody wants, and he thinks he's going to make a killing on the open market, which he kind of did. Now you have a problem with the clause. That's the only thing that raises suspicion. Is every 52 players play on this clause every year. You have now signed 2 contracts that have the clause in it, and now is the time that you're going to make it a big deal. I don't want to paint him as a villain yet, because he's done a lot for the Cowboys, and I think we all appreciate what he's done for the Cowboys. But this is a really ugly way to end, and I really hope that something else is happening behind the scenes that we just can't see.
Yeah, I think as my dog continues to bark, again, just, we're safe. Like, just so everybody's aware, like, my house is really not under attack. But I think, again, the day has shown, I think right now, and to your point, Aiden, everything is still kind of ever changing, that the onus for this might be on the middleman here. Because we know Randy loves the Cowboys. It's clear that the Cowboys weren't necessarily operating out of line or out of conventional norm or anything like that. It does seem there was some breakup, some confusion, some, dissolvement of trust in between those two parties. And so I'm inclined to say that that's where the blame ultimately falls. And I don't know. We'll see. I mean, Mark, you said it. More information will come out, as has kind of been the case all day long. A very, very, very unique thing that could only happen to the Dallas Cowboys, it seems. Although, Aiden, you had something to say.
Yeah, I don't think we've touched on this, but this clause apparently the Cowboys never really exercised this clause. So if the agent or Randy Gregory had taken, I don't know, maybe an hour to reach out to the other agents and reach out to the other players saying, hey, is this a big deal? Then everybody would have said, no, it's never affected me. So that's another thing I'll add.
I'm also curious if that was just something that Denver came at them with, like, hey, we won't put that kind of a clause in if you'll come here. And, and I'm wondering if there wasn't, for some reason, that Gregory's side was looking for an out. You're starting to suspect that.
And Mark, the podcast science can see. You've been a great visual episode for you, Mark, but but some things the podcast science can see. Mark is giving the hand signal in agreement. That's what it seems like, Tom. Again, like when you put all this math together, especially the early on, painting this as it's the Cowboys' fault. The Cowboys screwed him. The Cowboys were conniving. The Cowboys were slimy. Whatever the case may be, it really seems like for whatever reason, whether Randy or Randy's representation was looking for an out and leaned on this thing that maybe was this molehill that was made into a mountain. Is that where you're coming down to, Mark? I know you were, again, nodding in agreement with Tom.
Yeah, basically, what if it actually is this? Randy Gregory wanted to go to Denver, and then we heard that Jerry Jones made an impassioned plea and so forth. And so that was, oh, please, Randy, stay. We've been loyal to you. Just please stay, Randy. And so they were looking for a way to paint Randy as a good, maybe not a good guy, but the Cowboys as the bad guys, the Cowboys as the ones who messed it up, because it has been a dysfunctional offseason for them basically since the 49ers post-game press conferences. So that would give Gregory's representation the opportunity to show, oh, well, the Cowboys, they bungled it, like the Amari Cooper trade. And so then they mentioned that part of basically the inside baseball that the fans don't really know about. And then, I mean, we've seen it in the comments here. Well, that's just the Cowboys being dysfunctional with that particular clause. Who does it that way? So that's what I think this may be.
If so, masterful, or diabolical thought, at least on behalf of who came up with it. But the person who I think is most impacted negatively is Randy, which is really unfortunate because there are, as you have all seen, and I know a lot of our viewers and listeners have seen, a lot of people really upset at Randy Gregory. He has to, if we are to believe this was some sort of Trojan horse, Randy has to bear the fallout of it all. People vilifying him, thinking he's ungrateful for what the Joneses have done and all sorts of things. Tough day.
Yeah, but he doesn't care about the Dallas fan base, and I bet the Denver fan base is going to take an entirely different view of it.
Wow. Tom, you know what? Why don't you go root for the Broncos, Tom? If that's how you really feel, Tom, just, we don't need that attitude around here. All right, Super Bowl 12, watch out. All right, we all remember. Anyway, I know we already said one last thing, but anybody have anything else they want to say? Now's the time. Speak now, because we're about to get out of here. Anybody have anything else to get off their chest? That would have been the time where one of you would have said something that would have made me look cool. So,
Is Leighton Vander Esch a player? Like, I haven't heard any news of Leighton Vander Esch. I know we're probably not going to resign him, but I have heard zero interest about him. Is that just, I guess everybody's forgetting about Leighton. Poor Leighton.
Leighton could be, a candidate for the Mo Claiborne path, right? The 5th-year option declined, but then brought back on a 1-year prove-it deal. If they don't, who do we, just a very quick question to anybody who wants to answer. Who's more likely to be on the Cowboys in 2022? Leighton Vander Esch or Bobby Wagner?
Leighton Vander Esch.
Right. So,
yeah, probably.
You know what I mean? Like, if they truly are devoted to having, some level of depth, at linebacker so that Micah can float around, even if they do draft or sign Von Miller, it's Leighton Vander Esch. It's not Bobby Wagner. And so, that's just the Cowboy way. At least we're still going to do all the Wolf stuff if that happens. So, all right. You all said it all. Everybody in the comments, by the way, agrees that Leighton is the answer. Yeah. Tom, get us out of here. Say the last things and, just make it beautiful. That's all I ask.
I just am so nostalgic for that brief time earlier this year when I actually thought we were going to have a quiet off season with the Cowboys.
Well said.